we've heard about IoT for a while now, but I think it was in its infancy. What's happening at the moment is it's just becoming more talked about, and organisations are wondering how technology like Ben's going to showcase how that can integrate with software such as MyOsh. So it is happening, and integration is quite simple. It's usually done on a case-by-case basis, but basically two different systems can talk to each other. So Ben will explain that at the end. Maxmine is a mining technology service provider that captures, processes and analyses vast amounts of data in order to optimise performance and deliver significant productivity gains and cost savings to open pit mining operations. Harnesses the power of artificial intelligence, automated analytics, military-grade sensor technology, and human mining expertise to enhance mining productivity, integrating business improvement and operational analytics to drive operator behaviour change to deliver tangible improvements to open pit mining operations. Now, Ben is the head of product development at Maxmine. Maxmine is a fleet optimization service targeting improvement in open pit operations, leveraging data at scale. He's also got a guest with him, Joe, but Joe's actually logged in as Ben, but he might have something to say as well later. So over to you, Ben. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah. I might just, I couldn't do a better introduction to myself. Thank you very much for that, and Maxmine as well. Joe, did you want to just like quickly chime in? I think your role in the company is like quite unique in a IoT provider space, and just do a quick role of an implementation coach at Maxmine.
Yeah, no problem, Ben. Yeah, so I'm basically with Maxmine, I'm rolling out the product on the site level. So we basically take our features and product development tools, and we roll them out to the client and determine how the client needs to solve their existing problems, move their current KPIs, ranging from anywhere from productivity, safety improvements, could be even cost usage projects. So a business improvement background is where I've come from on this. So in a traditional sense, but now using a mining tech company to actually deliver these business improvement initiatives and making visible the opportunities and gaps on site, so to speak. So yeah, that's the very short version. Over to you, Ben.
Excellent, thanks, Joe. Yeah, and I was keen to get Joe to join us today because he's actually on the site where this case study was rolled out, and we've rolled this functionality out at a few sites. But we kind of like have made it even better. So what I'm going to take you through today is how we support shift supervisors to ensure safety in open pit mining operators. I'm going to give you a real concrete example of the challenges of maintaining safety, particularly around ramp safety, and why this is an unsolved problem in the industry until now, and give you an appreciation for some of the challenges, both technical and organizational, to kind of like really kind of close the safety risk gap there. I'm going to take you through the recipe that we take. I think Sarah mentioned that, you know, we're seeing a lot more about IoT now, and I think that's because in its infancy, it was really a solution looking for a problem, and now the kind of like understanding about how we kind of like repeatably apply this, and hopefully this kind of like gives you ideas about how you might be able to kind of take a similar approach in different areas as well. And then we'll get into the real world case study and demo that Joe can talk to as well, and we'll take everyone through that in a little bit of detail. So what we're talking about today is really Maxmine safety, which is all about kind of like safety functionality. But as Joe kind of mentioned, we also help around productivity uplift in much the same way, as well as cost reductions, and we really do target all of that load and haul fleet and anything that's kind of like moving around on the open pit. Maxmine safety is both a black box recorder where we do incident replays and incident investigation reports and really dive into what happened on an incident to help with that ICAM style investigation and closing the loop there. But today we're going to take a bit of a deep dive into our safety metrics that we use for operational monitoring. And when I met Sarah, I kind of like saw that instant connection between what we were doing and how that might be able to integrate with MyOsh, and we'll kind of like come back to that a little bit later. So what's the problem with ramps on mine sites? Basically, you know, mining is basically creating a big hole in the ground. And in order to do that, you must have a ramp to get these large machines down and move material out of the pit. Unlike a typical road network where these ramps don't change, because of the evolution of the pit, the ramps keep getting deeper and longer and change quite dynamically on site. So you can't just take a static view of the world and expect that the system's going to keep monitoring things safely. So it's actually a reasonably complicated problem because the nature of the environment changes quite quickly. Also, the nature of the machines that are being used. So these large haul trucks, you know, take a payload between 1 to 300 tons. Typically have an all-up weight between 2 to 500 tons. They have massive engines, huge power stations basically running them, and they represent a huge capital expense as well as a large operational risk, running 24 hours a day, day in, day out. And trucks descending down ramps, because they are so big and heavy, and with the way that the operations are set up, the braking systems in these equipment are only they can only do so much because gravity inevitably always wins. And so it's really important that when you're operating a machine like this, that you do keep the machine at all times within that safe operating envelope, so that you're able to kind of like keep the vehicle within a safe control scope. So you always got control over the vehicle at all times. We've seen, because we've monitored roughly 7 million hours of operations now, we've seen all sorts of very risky, very, very high risk scenarios where trucks do get away from operators. Sometimes when they do the wrong thing, sometimes not. And it's really important to kind of keep that safe operating. Operationally, this is super hard to monitor because roads change quickly, and ramps get longer as the mine site evolves. Joe, did you want to add anything else on the problem at this point?
I think that's a good overview. I guess just the key point of like one of our nearby mines had a fatality recently. So I guess the level of severity of if these rules aren't followed or if it's not adhered to, it's yeah, that's the scale of the outcome that potentially happened in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And so typically sites put in place these management controls in order to ensure the safety. So there'll be a big upfront safety assessment and kind of reviewed as part of as the mine evolves, but it kind of essentially relates to the mine engineering team assessing how the road designs are going to be laid out and what that means for truck safety. And then they basically define operational rules. Survey team needs to ensure that the roads are built to the mine plan, especially gradients, because a steeper decline will impact what operational rules are allowed. And then the training team needs to make sure that the operators are always keeping within truck limits and know what safe operations are. And then that assessment gets kicked over to operations, and it typically looks something like, when you're loaded, stay in second gear. When you're unloaded, stay in fifth gear. And that'll be written down in a traffic management plan that'll be communicated to the operators. But then when we go into an ongoing operational state, how do we know if we've got compliance? It's really hard from there to kind of like say, yes, definitely all of my operators are staying within those operational rules at all times, and we're maintaining a safe operation. The reason why this operational problem is super hard to solve is because there's a bunch of different aspects that are challenging in this space, because you've got mobile mining equipment in deep pits in remote areas, connectivity super hard. As mentioned before, and the environment changes, the roads get deeper and longer. and you can't just kind of configure a system based on a geofence rule. As the ramps kind of evolve, it quickly gets out of date. I think another common theme in the mining sector is because the sector is so profitable, they've had the dream of technology been sent through them quite a lot, and so there's an inherent skepticism about new technology being able to kind of solve this, and so you really do need to demonstrate an ability to be able to solve this well. Data access on these machines, it's very hard to know what gear the equipment is in, if that's the operational rule, and often that's really critical for making sure that the rules are fair for individuals that are operating the machines. And it's not something that OEMs like openly provide access for. And then I think the last thing that's always kind of like underestimated is the fact that, you know, a mine site operator is very remote, doesn't want another system beeping at them in the cab, you know, and you've really got to like bake that in a way that works with their day-to-day operations. Other than the operator, the mine supervisor tends to be a former operator that's been promoted into a people management role, and their primary responsibility is safety and people. And then they've got the secondary responsibility of like making sure production's happening and working well. And that sounds pretty good on face value, but given the size of these typical sites, you know, some of these sites are 20 kilometers across, and it's really hard to kind of stay across everything, especially when you're looking at having something like 20, 30, 40 operators reporting to you. It's really impossible to be across what every one of those people is doing at any point in time. And so what we've really focused on doing is like creating a system that helps manage across many of those aspects that have previously been unmeasurable. Cool, so I want to change tack just quickly and just kind of go through like a common template of how we go about solving these types of problems. So we've really focused through everything that we've done with Maxmine is focused on operational improvement through gamification. So the way we break that down is we set up metrics around trusted, personalized information for every individual. We frame up all of those improvements as opportunities. So we're focusing on a positive reinforcement wherever possible. And then the last element is closing the loop. So we reward the positive behaviors as best as we can. And then I think with this example, we really had to call out the extremes because supervisors just didn't have that kind of like ability to see where the really risky events were happening and take action in a timely fashion. So in terms of trusted, personalized information, it's really about breaking down KPIs to individuals about something that means something to them, and they are able to influence with their behaviors. So we don't track truck drivers on how many tons they're moving because they might drive a smaller truck today, and that's not really a fair KPI for them. So what we do is we kind of like always make it about something that they're in control of affecting. We always frame up the opportunities as potential improvements, and we give clear, specific instructions about how to improve. Like giving all that extra context is critical for helping people improve. And then the last one is closing the loop. So we make sure that we, wherever possible, reward and positively motivate and make sure that it's a carrot more than a stick. And that tends to work on the top, roughly 2/3 of the cohort. There's a third that genuinely just want to get better. The next third will see that the first third get better and get called out for it. And then the last third, generally, there's always a bit of a challenge in kind of like getting that whole cohort to improve. But once that kind of top 2/3 is kind of taken on, and this kind of like last element is we try and use as sparingly as possible because we really want to make it a positive experience about working with the technology for safety and productivity outcomes. So now we're gonna jump into a real world example and take you through specifically how we do that for ramps. So coming back to that problem we kind of talked about before, you know, big heavy trucks, it's very easy to let the truck get out of control and go a bit too fast. And so the way we solve that is we've built a system that automatically identifies ramps and does that with a high degree of confidence. We try and remove as much as possible false positives. We do a lot of smarts and science, and I'm not really going to get into that too much, but we spend a lot of effort there. And then once we've identified all those ramps and seeing those machines go through those ramps, we fit those operational rules. So it might be second gear when loaded, fifth gear when unloaded. We take all that context about what's going on in the operations, and then we provide that feedback to operators in that positive gamified approach. And so we got some examples of what this typically looks like at a site. We'll put up a KPI dashboard that really provides individuals with how they're going on each of those KPIs. One of those will be how they're going on ramps, what proportion of ramps are they doing well today, and let them work out how to improve that score. And ideally, we want to move our cohorts from, you know, the team on the left that was just new to Maxmine over to the team that's like very mature, working with Maxmine day in, day out. So Joe, maybe you might want to just give us the example you had in WA in the site that you're on right now, that we'd rolled out that kind of like individual feedback as much as we could, and they still had concerns about how much events were kind of happening, what the problem was with there.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues was just the number of people a supervisor has to manage on site. So imagine 60 or 70 direct reports, all in different pieces of equipment running around and trying to keep track of non-compliances or non-conformances as in case of ramp events. So what we built was a system that was actually able to notify the supervisor about a half hour, 45 minutes after the event or after the non-conformance or infringement, whatever you want to call it, happened, so that he or she would be able to notify the operator at an appropriate time during a grid break or lunch in the same shift, as opposed to trying to find an operator 5 days later and remembering the event with clarity. So that real-time urgency, I guess, was really key to them to actually be able to get that feedback to the operator that, hey, today, you know, you broke a couple of ramp infringements. Want to get on top of that as soon as we can so that we don't cause any serious incidents. That was critical to them. So that was basically what Ben's team went off and built, that real-time notification system, so that we can close that feedback loop to the operator in the shift. You got to remember as well, in mining, you have a huge turnover of operators. So we've got a lot of new operators, or greenies, so to speak. So get passed out on your truck, but you pretty much don't really have a lot of experience with these guys. So we try to get that experience, this feedback loop to them as soon as we can before, before an incident would occur with an overspeed. So I guess that's probably the very short version, but yeah, maybe Ben, you want to talk about the results, things like that? Yeah,
no, that's perfect. Thanks, Joe. So what the supervisor would get straight to the supervisors at minesite.com.au. They'd get an email automated, within 20-30 minutes of a ramp event happening, calling out specifically that equipment, what speed they were going, whether they were loaded, and what the ramp name was. So you got like all that specificity to go and follow up and take action on those exceptions. And so as Joe mentioned, they're really, site was getting concerned about the number of severe events, like severe being I think it was like 5 or 7 Ks over the kind of like the threshold. And so they're really just calling out the very significant kind of non-conformances. And we were all kind of blown away by the amount of change, just how stark the before versus after kind of behavior change was. Like in business improvement, you rarely see that perfect step change, and it's pretty amazing to kind of like see pretty much as soon as we turned on that ability, supervisors were all aware of how the system worked, and really has made a massive difference to the number of severe overspeed alerts happening on that side. Cool. So I might just wrap up just quickly. You know, we took you through a concrete unsolved problem and demonstrated how, you know, the factors that are required to kind of close that gap using ramp safety for open pits. Kind of gave you a bit of a recipe about how to improve safety through data using trusted, personalized information, frame up those improvements as opportunities, and make sure that you're closing the loop on everything you're doing there. Yeah, I think Joe helped out well to kind of demonstrate that through that real world example on that we had at that site in WA.
So is it back to me, Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Okay. All right, so I'd like to ask anyone to put any questions in the Q&A chat there if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will be putting on that email later today, we'll put the contact details for Ben and Maxmine out there so you can get in contact with them. Yes, as I said, on the Academy, there'll be a new section for IoT, and we are having a few webinars with different sort of technology, because it does seem to be the way forward. I think, Ben, we did talk briefly about how would a MyOsh integration look with Maxmine?
Yeah, so as part of all of our functionality at Maxmine, we expose public APIs or APIs that our clients can hit. And so what we do is, just like that notification service, we could be building an integration using that API from Maxmine, and to basically be ensuring that the control thresholds or the acceptable limits of those operational controls in say a bow tie analysis could be maintained, and we make sure that at a management level or at a safety manager level that you're able to kind of monitor that and make sure that the site's still within the kind of guidance that your operational controls have set out, and make sure that the traffic management plan is actually in compliance.
Yeah, then I guess how that would look with MyOsh, if you were using a digital bow tie or critical control management, obviously, depending on how you've configured the whole process, if something does happen and it triggers an impact on a control in MyOsh, and the two systems have spoken to each other, then the relevant people would be immediately notified by various methods, SMS, email notifications, and of course that element, that control of the bow tie, would then show up as having control issues. And also there's also other things that can happen. It can add a non-conformance or change a status in another record or in an employee record. All sorts of things can happen. So that's how IoT is looking, and sounds great, Ben. There aren't any questions at the moment, so I will remind everyone this will be on YouTube. You can listen to a podcast, you can watch it at a quicker speed if you want to. And yeah, that's great. Thanks for joining us, Ben and Joe.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Okay.
So.
Thanks, Joe. All right, everyone. Bye. See ya.